Now, this has been the major news for at least 2 days now. It has been stated by Biden, U.S. President Biden, that the United States is going to withdraw all troops by September 11th. And they say 0 troops. Like, everyone gone, they've completely pulled out of Afghanistan, and the country will be back in the hands of the Afghan people. They say the plans to withdraw the remaining 2,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan by September 11th, 2001, at 20 years to the day that gave the justification for the invasion of the country. Now, this reportedly comes at the time when there's an intelligence plan on the situation in Afghanistan that's been passed around the government. It has not been made public, but there are officials speaking on the condition of anonymity, of course, that have been talking about this U.S. Intelligence Committee release that says that the outlook for the future of U.S. occupation in Afghanistan is, quote, gloomy, which is another way of saying really, really bad, and they have a low chance of achieving a peace deal this year. So it seems like the United States is ready to say, we've had enough. We've gone on this for 20 years. We haven't accomplished anything. They're not taking the country. They're actually struggling to maintain coverage of areas right now. The Taliban is taking many areas back. It has been terrible. And this comes after Donald Trump said that troop forces would be pulled by May 1st. But that appears that under Biden, that's when the withdrawal is going to begin. There are going to be incremental steps of removing U.S. troops from the country, which is said to begin on May 1st and end on September 11th. Significantly, and this is what's really important, is that so far what's been proposed has no conditions, including security of human rights, or human rights. Meaning, there's no, okay, we'll leave as long as this doesn't happen. Okay, we won't leave as long as this justification for remaining there doesn't take place. Normally that's the condition. Okay, we'll leave just so long as the Taliban doesn't do this, this, and this, and then mysteriously they've got their excuse to remain in the country. But it seems they're not making these conditions this time, which leads me to believe that this might be just a little bit more serious. There's a summit that was scheduled for April 24th, a kind of meeting between the U.S. and Taliban resistance that essentially wasn't going to take place because the Taliban said that they weren't going to show up. Because they said they wouldn't make any promises or any agreements unless the United States had left the country. Now, the one thing that I think is important here is that they've left it unclear as to whether or not a lot of special forces that are working on the ground will leave as well. See, the problem is that those special forces working in the country aren't a part of the official U.S. troop count. So when they say 0 U.S. troops, are they counting these ones that are normally not counted? Well, the special operations remain in the country. And then the lion's share, the bulk of this, fall on to the other countries or fall on to the Afghani security forces. And that's another question altogether. Essentially, the rest of the NATO countries are going to have to pick up the slack. And we already know that every single one of the NATO allies who are inside the country right now don't want to be there. So this creates a very destabilizing effect for NATO itself. If the U.S. pulls out, it's very likely not long after the rest of the NATO countries are going to leave as well. And then Afghanistan will return to the hands of the Afghan people because there's nobody left but the Afghan people. Now, it's interesting that this is happening now. I think that part of the bourgeoisie are saying, look, we're not going to win this. It's a giant money pit. We've lost. Cut our losses. Start thinking of another way to get the same job done. Just keep in mind now that the budget for the U.S. is being hammered because a lot of the people who pay taxes, that being the middle and the upper middle, because you can't tax poor people, and the rich, the elite, won't actually pay their taxes at all. So, you know, they're under a financial situation, especially given the massive expansion of the debt under Donald Trump. Now, it's true that Biden has passed a new military budget of $736 billion, which is actually the largest in U.S. history, but I digress. I think that they're tired of wasting money on a war that they cannot win, and that maybe troop morale is really bad. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. At least from the stories of the people who've come back saying it's not going good. But I think that's, I think that's what's important here. I think that generally the bourgeoisie are tired of this war, that it's not accomplishing anything, and it's just wasting money and resources. I'm sure the weapons manufacturers are just happy to have it keep going, and they'll probably use some kind of pressure in some way, shape, or form to try to keep the thing going so they can make their money, obviously. Now, it was Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell who was the loudest voice in opposition to this, saying that it was turning tail and abandoning the fight in Afghanistan. Except that he didn't call it that when Trump suggested the same thing, or even said that he was going to do saying that he was actually going to do it. I find it questionable whether or not he was really going to do it or not, but the point is, it's showing the complete hypocrisy of Mitch McConnell. It's wise, great leader Trump when he decides to do it, but it's, turn tail, run, abandon the fight in Afghanistan, cower, like Joe Biden does it. I mean, this is politics. I mean, these people don't have a shred of integrity to begin with. It's not surprising, but it is important to point out. Now, what concerns me is that if they do pull all those troops out of Afghanistan, where are they going to go next? Because they're going to go somewhere. I mean, the U.S. empire is not just going to stop. That's not how empires work. My concern is that maybe those 2,500 troops, and maybe even more afterwards, given the pump-up of the U.S. military budget, maybe they're going to end up in places surrounding Iran. Because I suspect that might be the next major theater of operation. Because not only has the U.S. completely sabotaged the JCPOA agreement, I mean, Trump did it out of spite to his own predecessor, Obama. And then he was going to do the maximum pressure campaign and force Iran to come to the table to sign a new agreement that was even worse for Iran than the one that already existed. And I believe that the Biden administration is doing the exact same thing, which is why they will not return to the agreement, given the recent conference that they just had on it in Vienna, and they refused to make any concessions, where Iran said, how about everybody just return to the original agreement, and then everything can go back to the way it was. But the U.S. won't do that. They won't release those sanctions that were put in the country unlawfully by Trump and just simply return. They're carrying out the same pressure and carrying out the same illegal acts that Trump actually did. So there's no change with Biden whatsoever. And I think that's what this is about. This is about placing pressure on Iran. I think that they're going to pull the troops out of Afghanistan and put them somewhere near the border with Iran as a show of force. And then eventually, maybe someday, we have weapons of mass destruction, or incubator babies, or infinite amounts of gulags killing more people than live in the country as a justification for invading it. I mean, it's not like they haven't repeatedly done this throughout history. So I think that's what the danger is here. I think that essentially what's going to happen is that the troops are going to come out of Afghanistan, and they're going to be set up to carry out hostilities against Iran.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.